Hello, well, welcome back to our part 3 on bankruptcy. Right now, we're going to talk about the discharge of trustee. So in part 2, we learn how to calculate the money that each creditor would obtain. Now we are going to concentrate on what is a discharge, how long before getting a discharge, and is everything discharged? So, okay. So it says here that a discharge releases the bankrupt from the legal obligation to repay his debt, except there are debts that, despite the fact that you filed for bankruptcy, even the discharge of bankruptcy will not discharge you from those debts. So let's look at Article 178 of the BIA. Okay, so here is a list of debts that, despite the fact that you filed for bankruptcy, you will not be discharged of. So here it says any fine, penalty, restitution order, or order similar in nature, order imposed by a court in respect to an offense, or any debt rising out of a recognizance or bail. Okay, so all those debts will not be discharged. If you had to pay bail, it's not because you filed bankruptcy that all of a sudden it disappears. Okay, so the bail will still be there. Here it says if you had to pay, or if you were ordered to pay in a civil court, damages in 2 events. Okay, bodily harm or sexual assault. So you're going to wonder, well, how come these are crimes? So why in a civil court? Well, you know that in a civil court, you can sue, except that we're not facing the person who is in a criminal case accused. Here will be the defendant. There's no imprisonment. Okay, there's no fine. What you have is damages. Okay, so if a person was ordered to pay for damages in case of bodily harm, sexual assault, or wrongful death, those amounts, if you were ordered to pay $100,000 for bodily harm, well, I'm sorry, but if you file bankruptcy, even with the discharge, you will still have to reimburse that money. Yeah. What else? Here. So this right here, sorry. Okay. Oops, sorry, my slide changed by itself. So any money for alimony or alimentary pension. So remember in part 2 when we did the alimony for Suzanne. So there was a part that was in the preferred creditors. There was a part that was also in the ordinary creditors. But the balance in her case will remain even after discharge. Okay, so in that sense, Suzanne was lucky, okay, because the debt doesn't disappear. Or it's a misconception that people think that I owe alimony, I'll file for bankruptcy, then I won't have only a judge can remove the obligation to pay alimony or alimentary pension. Same thing here for support or maintenance or affiliation. Okay, so those that do not, okay, disappear with the discharge. Okay. Right. Here at D, well, that's understandable. If you were responsible for fraud, embezzlement, or misappropriation or defalcation, in this case, the amount of money that you were ordered to pay or to reimburse as damages, you're still liable for that. Okay. So it says, or in the province of Quebec as a trustee. So if you were the trustee of the or administrator of the property of others, and that either misappropriation or embezzlement, you misuse the money, you are responsible. At E, sorry, here. Here, any debt or liability, okay, from obtaining property or services by false pretense or fraudulent misrepresentation. So this is, again, among the same lines as fraud or embezzlement. Okay, so if you've obtained property, you will have, if possible, you'll have to restitute. Or if you cannot, and if you have to pay damages because of that, you will still need to reimburse. F here, well, F is something that is very important for corporations because it talks about the dividend. So the dividend of a creditor would have been entitled to receive. So a dividend is an amount of money that is given to a shareholder, depending on his category of shares. Okay, so if you were entitled to receive a dividend and it was never given, well, the money is not lost, okay, in the sense that, well, it might be lost because for corporations it works slightly differently, but the dividend, it doesn't mean because they file for bankruptcy that automatically it will disappear. Okay, we'll see, and keep that in mind in 2 slides. Okay, when we'll talk about more of discharge and how long does it take before you can get discharged from bankruptcy. G, any debt or obligation. And this is something that you might be interested in. Okay, obligation in respect to student loan. So either if it was made under the Canada Student Loans Act or the Canada Student Financial Assistance Act. So there are conditions. So if you want to know, which I don't recommend, but if you want to know, I may file for bankruptcy, I got student loans, will I have to reimburse? Well, the question is, it depends. It depends on what? Well, it depends, first of all, if it is before, okay, so before the date on which the bankrupt ceases to be a full-time or part-time student. So for instance, if you file for bankruptcy right now, because you're receiving student loans, it's not a good idea. You're going to have to reimburse. Okay, because it's before the date on which you ceases to be a student. Okay. And you have to think about it, because if you file for bankruptcy within 7 years, okay, after the date on which you cease to be a full or part-time student. Okay, so there's a gap. So if you graduated and in 5 years you decide to file for bankruptcy, if you've received student loan, you're gonna have to pay it back. If you graduated 10 years ago, then you don't. Okay, so that is a way to avoid, because traditionally speaking, what happened is that some students would go to, I don't know, medical school or dental school, and you know, studies were very expensive and everything. So as soon as they graduated, poof, they filed for bankruptcy and then turned around and were hired or worked as a dentist or a doctor and made a bunch of money. Okay, so to avoid that, they said, okay, well, let's wait 7 years after. So mostly you'll have either a car, a house, property, assets, or a salary. Okay, so it's something to think about. Because when you're a student and if you don't have anything else, then you don't care as much. The same obligations do apply if you got a loan under the Apprentice Loans Act. Okay, so if you file bankruptcy before you stopped, being an apprentice, or within 7 days, 7 years, 7 days. Okay. Sorry. Also, any interest that might be owed in relation to an amount that is referred to everything before. So if you paid interest on damages that you had to reimburse for wrongful death, okay, that interest also is not discharged. So if it's anything that you had to reimburse, if there's an interest on that amount, you also have to reimburse both the amount and the interest. So think about it twice. Next, so to the question, okay, but how long will it be before I can be discharged? Well, it depends. In your case, it depends if it's a first bankruptcy, a second bankruptcy, a third or fourth, or etc. Okay. So for a first bankruptcy or for any other bankruptcy, there will be the notion of surplus income. Okay. On the next page, you will have a link to a video for the surplus income to explain what it is. So if it's your first bankruptcy and you don't have to pay surplus income, okay, normally you will be discharged 9 months after. It's called an automatic discharge. Okay. 168.1, paragraph 1A. Okay. If you had to pay a surplus income greater than $200 a month, you will be discharged after 21 months. Okay. So what is a surplus income? Well, to explain that, I have for you in your notes, you have here, you can see it on the slide, but it's full of letters and stuff. So you have it also in your notes, and I'm going to put it in the description below. But you have a short video that will talk about surplus income. What is surplus income and how does it work? Okay. To give you a heads up, okay, the video you'll see, it's a guy that explains, and I always make the students laugh by telling them the most important part for the guy is, well, listen to what he says, plus the mug. He's holding a mug, which is a publicity stunt, because I think it's, I don't know if it's his firm, but anyway, but he holds a mug and it's kind of obvious. So, okay, so the guy, as I was telling you, what the video is, what, 4 minutes? Yeah. So it's 4 minutes, and he's a trustee, and he will explain to you what is a surplus income. So a surplus income is when you make more money than when the government decides that it should be the acceptable threshold. Okay, just to give you an idea, okay, these are the surplus income for 2022, but it hasn't changed. If in your notes it says 2021, it's the same. The threshold haven't, changed by a dime. So it means if you're a single person, okay, you will have a certain limit. If you make more than that limit, okay, you are considered rich. No, it's a joke. But if you make more than the surplus income, is there a, I'm just checking to see if there was something written. No, okay. So the surplus income is, they give you a threshold. If you make more than that, they will calculate half of the difference. So for instance, if you are at, here the limit for one person, so a single person is $2,248. If you make $2,300, you're making $52 over the limit. So they calculate $26, which is half of it. $26 is less than 200. Okay. If you make 3,000, you are over the limit. So the limit, they take the limit, they see what you make on top of the limit. They take 50%, so half of the difference, and that goes toward paying surplus income. If you make more than 200 in surplus income, you will remain bankrupt longer. Why? The reason for that is that it says, well, look, if you're rich enough, okay, to pay the difference, if you make more money, it's normal that you should reimburse more. Okay, so if you reimburse more, you will be bankrupt for a longer period of time, hopefully, so that you'll reimburse more and it will be a bit more fair for your creditors. Okay, but as you will see, he'll explain to you what is in the surplus income. Okay, so he has examples and he will show it to you. So if it's your second bankruptcy, it will depend. If you don't make surplus payment, a second bankruptcy is 24 months. But if you make great surplus income greater than 200 a month, okay, that will be 36 months. Okay. One thing that is extremely important, and it's linked to the dividend that I was talking about a few minutes ago in the discharge. If you are a business, and that is super important, because for a business, there is no discharge like what you have for a person. Okay, 9 months if it's an automatic, if it's a first bankruptcy and you're not making surplus payment, 21 months if you're making surplus payment, 24 or 36 if it's a second bankruptcy. That doesn't exist. For a business, the only way to be discharged is by reimbursing your debt, all of it. So if you go to 169 paragraph 4, okay, here, so you have here at 170, 178, you have what is discharged, what is not discharged with bankruptcy. So this is everything that we talked about. Where was I here? Okay. So at 169, you have paragraph 4, bankrupt corporation. A bankrupt corporation may not apply for a discharge unless it has satisfied the claims of its creditors in full. Okay. So that's why when you have a corporation and they file bankruptcy, they never get out of it. The person behind it, the directors can just start the next day a new corporation under a new name and start fresh. And that's what usually people do. Okay. So why? Well, because they know that they will never have to pay the entire amount. Okay, so instead of that, what they'll do, they'll start another business. So that's why it's a bigger liability for also like banks when you have loans, and that's why they want to have a guarantee, okay, of the person behind, so the president or a director, by a personal guarantee. Okay. So here, that's very specific, and that applies only to corporations. So a corporation, even if it's 9 months and it's a first bankruptcy, it doesn't apply. They have to reimburse everything before they can be discharged. Okay. So if you want a 168, just before, so at 168, you will have here discharge of bankruptcy, so 168.1. So if you've never been bankrupt before, it will be automatic unless there's an opposition, but at the expiry of 9 months, if you don't have to make surplus income, or 21 months if you have to make, or if you have surplus income. Okay. So what I suggest is that you go over the video from the trustee. I'll explain to you the surplus income. Then go over everything, make sure that you've watched the 3 parts and you understand. And next week, when for next class, when we see each other, I suggest you bring your questions with you. And if there's part of bankruptcy that we haven't covered, or that you still have questions, you can send me your questions ahead, and we will be able to discuss it next class. Okay. So that's all for today, and that's all for bankruptcy. I hope that it made you understand a little bit more about the process of it. And as I said, bring all your questions for next week. Okay, so until then, see you soon. Bye-bye.